the Yorkshire Beach Rangers team. I'm happy for you to be recorded. Yes, just press the button. So I just want to give you a really brief introduction to the Trust's work in conserving sort of marine megafauna, and how over the years we've focused a lot of our effort for bottlenose dolphins for their obvious value. So yeah, I'm just giving a little bit of an introduction to Shauna's talk before she goes on to specifically talk about the Southwest research. So Cornwall Wildlife Trust is part of 47 wildlife trusts around the whole of the UK that all work towards a vision, and that vision is called Living Seas. It's our Living Seas vision, and as almost an island, such a maritime county, we're one of the best living seas teams in the country, basically. So we have this wonderful vision where ultimately wildlife thrives. It recovers from past decline, it can adapt to the pressures that we put upon it, and that people care, which is a big part of what we do. So that's our vision. To achieve that vision, we have a plethora of projects within Living Seas, within our marine team, where we're always creating that awareness for people to care. It's a big part of what we do. We're always campaigning for better protection, because the marine environment is still behind the way we manage our terrestrial environment, so we need to do better. And we're always collecting data, because we cannot protect and manage something well unless we really understand what's going on. So all of our projects do all of those things. So we have a ton of projects at Cornwall Wildlife Trust, from diving to good sustainable seafood, to obviously the Yorkshire Beach Rangers project, who have organised today's webinar. But the one I'm specifically focusing on today is Seaquest Southwest. And Seaquest Southwest is a really historic project at the Trust that's been running for decades, where ultimately we're encouraging people to tell us what they see when they're out and about around Cornwall. It's a very, very simple concept, and yet it is so effective and valuable in collecting enormous amounts of data about what wildlife exists around our coast and what it's doing. And without people giving us that information, we simply do not have the time and resources to get it ourselves. So we have these aims within Seaquest. It's about people engaging in the marine and coastal environment. It's about people collecting data on it, and it's about us using that information. It doesn't just sit in a drawer or in a desktop file. It's being used for us to understand and conserve this really valuable environment. So we do that in Seaquest Southwest through doing a lot of public engagement, running a lot of events, whether that's sea watches, whether it's recorders evenings, it's seminars, it's so that people can sort of learn how to just send in ad hoc records and give us those sightings that they happen to see when they're on the coast or walking their dogs on the beach. But we also support trained volunteers, and we do a lot of training and a lot of work with our volunteers so that they can do systematic, structured surveys to give us that slightly higher level of data about what's going on around our coastline. And it is used by scientists. It's shared regionally and nationally for processes like MPA designations or sort of better management for certain species in our waters. Okay, so we focus on all big things generally, what you can see from the coast, whether that's jellyfish or basking sharks, or of course, as we're talking about today, bottlenose dolphins, so cetaceans, porpoises, dolphins and whales. And just to kind of give you an example of the sort of stuff that we bring in, that's a graph from the 2019 Seaquest report, and a huge thank you to Nikki Clear from the Environmental Records Centre for Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, who is our Marine Data Officer and helps us process and crunch numbers. And so that just gives you the results from the last 5 years of the sort of big groups, the sort of major groups of animals that we see, from bluefin tuna now, which is incredible, to bottlenose dolphins. So you can sort of see the variations on the years of what we have coming in. Now, nearly 2,000 sightings. So that's an individual sighting. That sighting may represent dozens, if not hundreds of animals. So it's, thousands and thousands of animals have been recorded to our Environmental Records Centre, which represents 17 marine megafauna species, which is an amazing amount of data. So that's there to be used, whether you're a student or whether you're a consultant, you're a developer, whether you work for a government agency, that data is there to be accessed and used, which is really amazing stuff. And I'm sorry about a slightly sad picture, but this is the reality of around our coastline. This is a bottlenose dolphin, which washed up in Foy in 2018. This is a really, exciting stranding. We only get 1 or 2, perhaps none, wash up each year, and from being such an elusive creature, this is an amazing opportunity to really sort of examine it in more detail. What you can see here is this bottlenose dolphin was clearly involved in bycatch, which is when they're accidentally caught up in nets because it's been cut in half ultimately at the back there. And now Shauna's going to go into more detail about this species and how lucky we are to have this inshore pod around Cornwall. And really, this is just to show we have a duty of care to protect them, to understand them and protect them in our waters. And they are very, very vulnerable. They're vulnerable to disturbance. They're vulnerable to pollution, hugely. Being so close to inshore to our land means they interact with us. So they're really, really vulnerable. And of course here, bycatch. So, we need to really think about this animal. We need to think about it. We need to work really hard to protect it in our coastal waters. And the Trust have always done that. And because of that, we've focused a lot of our marine conservation effort in sort of studying and shouting out about bottlenose in our county. So this sort of started, it's been going on for years with Seaquest and with historic members of the Trust. But in 2015, we did a big appeal, the Bottlenose Dolphin Appeal, which led to the development of the Bottlenose Dolphin Consortium, which was a collaboration of partners with the organisations and groups who have agreed to come together to share their data so that we can do some really thorough and effective research on these animals. This is a map created by the Environmental Records Centre just to demonstrate the fact that we do have bottlenose dolphins in these waters, that they range all around the coast. And Shauna is going to go into much more detail about sort of what this is, the Bottlenose Dolphin Consortium have done and what it's representing. But this is just to show you how important our waters are for this amazing animal. So I just want to finish really by highlighting the fact that we want people to record what they see. Whether you're a Seaquest volunteer or not, you can still send in your sightings to the Environmental Records Centre for Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. It's really easy to do so through a fancy app, which you can download on any of your phones, iPhone or Android. And it's really easy for you to create an account and upload all your biological records, whether it's marine or terrestrial. But that is so valuable to us in understanding what's going on in Cornwall with its wildlife. So yeah, a really brief overview. Thank you so much for listening. Any Seaquest questions, just get in touch with the project. We are having a Seaquest week at the end of July for your shore beach rangers with the I Spy July. So you'll hear more about Seaquest then that week through our social media pages. And really over to Shauna to go into more details about Cornwall's bottlenose dolphins and what research is happening for us to better understand and conserve them. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Abby.
Okay, stop share.
Stop share.
Is that all right? All done? Back?
Yes.
Fabulous.
Sorry, it took me a while to share my screen.
It is a bit of a, be a bit slow, can Zoom.
Okay, so I'm Shauna. I'm from the University of Plymouth, and I'm currently researching the bottlenose dolphins around the southwest of England. And hopefully over the course of this morning, I'll convert you all into citizen scientists for us. But just at the beginning, I thought I'd start with a little bit of an intro into bottlenose dolphins before talking about the previous work we've done here around the coast, and then what we're currently trying to do this year.
You have done 7 minutes, Piglet.
As you can see on this map, bottlenose dolphins can be found throughout the globe, from tropical seas to cooler temperate regions, and are only actually absent from the poles. They can be found in offshore and coastal waters, occurring in a wide range of habitats, from estuaries and bays to the vast open ocean. And these distributions usually occur not only due to prey availability and climate, but also how these dolphins are adapted to these environments. And the highest northern population, in fact, are actually found here in the UK, up in the Moray Firth, Scotland. And although some populations, such as this population, the Moray Firth, are relatively well studied, those in less accessible habitats of lower population numbers, such as our southwest dolphins, have received less attention, and because of that, we just don't know that much about them yet. So there are 6 species living around the UK, with 4 identified just off in Cornish waters. So it can be quite challenging to identify them if you only get a brief glimpse of them. But luckily for us, bottlenose dolphins can easily be spotted above the waves due to their relatively short dives and their love for aerial displays. They love to leap, they love to tail slap, they love to spy hop, which can all give us a better look and to identify them better. And compared to other bottlenose dolphins, as you can see here, bottlenose dolphins are actually quite plain. They don't have these patterns or colorations that other dolphins have, like the wonderful hourglass pattern on the common dolphins. And if we actually have a closer look, you can actually see they're actually mostly grey. They're darker shading on the top with a paler belly. They have these lovely short stubby beaks, which are separated from their head with quite a prominent crease. They have lovely long pointed flippers, and they have a grey fluke with a median notch in the middle. And one of the most important identification features for a bottlenose dolphin is their large sickle-shaped dorsal fin. And these dorsal fins can have quite prominent scratches and notches on them, which can help us to identify them. And that's very important to our current study, and something I'll come back to later on in the talk and talk a little bit more about. So here in the UK, they can grow to be quite large, up to about 4 meters, and live to up to about 50 years. Reaching speeds of about 30 kilometers an hour and diving for up to 8 minutes. They eat a wide variety of organisms, but this depends mainly on which habitat they're living in. And they're very social and inquisitive. They communicate through clicks and whistles, and they can often come up to boats to bell ride, or even just come up just to have a look at you, because they are very inquisitive. So bottlenose dolphins are very social, and they can only be spotted traveling in these groups. However, much like us, they don't strictly stick to these groups. Dolphins can switch and change who they're with, and they've actually shown to have some preferences for who they're actually hanging out with, but usually they're still within the same community. And as I mentioned before, dolphins live in a wide variety of habitats, but there are actually 2 different types of bottlenose dolphins: those that live out offshore and those that live in our coastal waters. And the difference between these 2 types are observable, but they're just a little bit too subtle to divide them into subspecies, so instead we call them ecotypes. Now, these ecotypes can interact with one another, but they're distinct populations with different genetics, habitat, prey, and behaviour. And in some areas, they've even been shown to have some morphological differences, such as differences in size and differences in nasal forms. And that's not actually the only separation in the bottlenose dolphin world. Even coastal populations can be distinctive from one another. They can either be geographically separated from other populations, or they can have specialised adaptations to a particular region, which can cause them to become distinct over time, with many coastal populations actually being genetically different from each other. And this is because the different habitats and environmental conditions can lead to very different behaviours, such as specialised foraging techniques, which can cause the communities to separate over time. So here are quite a few fun examples of very distinctive behaviour of bottlenose dolphins from around the world. On the left here, we have a bottlenose dolphin community in Shark Bay, Western Australia, that have learned to actually put marine sponges on their beaks before they forage. And this is because they live in areas with very hard bottom sediments, and they want to go after fish that live in these sediments. So it's thought they put on these sponges to actually protect their noses whilst they're looking for food. And down in the bottom right, we have a community of coastal bottlenoses in Laguna, Brazil, which have actually learned to work with local fishermen by actually herding the mullet into their nets, which means they can actually get more food themselves if they're helping out with the fishermen. And here in the top right, we have some bottlenoses in Savannah, Georgia, who've actually learned to follow these commercial shrimp trawlers, which may not always be a good thing, because although they can easily find their food, they can in fact come entangled in the fishing gear, so it's not a behaviour we'd particularly like to encourage. But although all these populations, these coastal populations, can differ around the world, they do have some similarities and some big differences with offshore populations. So in comparison to offshores, coastal populations are usually very small. They usually travel in small numbers, about 2 to 15, very close to shore. They prefer shallow water, about 40 to 50 meters deep, and can have very distinctive home ranges around the coast. Offshore populations, on the other hand, are large. They usually travel in hundreds and can even be into the thousands. They do come in close to shore, but spend the majority of their time out in the open ocean off the continental shelf in waters more than 200 meters deep. And they usually travel large distances with no particular loyalty to an area. So it's quite different to how coastal populations operate. And the differences between these two ecotypes is thought to have occurred to how they've adapted to their own habitats. And as we've seen about coastal dolphins previously, they can adapt to certain areas. However, some of these adaptations can be a lot more subtle than using a sponge on their nose. Dolphins foraging around coastal areas have actually been shown to actually use the coastal habitat to help find and aggregate their food by using tides or steep slopes of the seabed to kind of capture their prey in, whereas offshores living out in the vast open ocean have very patchily distributed prey. So it's thought that traveling in these vast groups over a really big range is thought to be their adaptation to finding this patchily distributed food. And although sadly both these ecotypes are exposed to threats in the marine environment, as Abby did touch on, coastal communities are particularly vulnerable. This is due to both how low their population numbers are and how close they are to us humans. Their small population size unfortunately means they're less genetically diverse compared to these larger offshore pods, and so are less resilient to disease and pollution that are coming into their area. And due to these limited numbers, they actually have less reproducing females in these small populations, so they may actually find it difficult to replenish their numbers in comparison to these larger communities if they are affected. But also, more importantly, due to their particular adaptations to coastal life, they may find it difficult or even impossible to move to adjacent areas where these features aren't available when the habitat is negatively affected. And sadly, because coastal areas, especially in comparison to the vast open ocean, they are just more susceptible to these detrimental activities just purely because they're so close to human society. So you get a lot more habitat degradation, you get a lot more pollution and a lot more noise, which is very detrimental to dolphins and just increases the vulnerability of these coastal populations. But luckily, in the UK, we do have a lot of protection for bottlenose dolphins. They are protected under a variety of different UK and EU laws. And when a resident pod is identified, they're usually protected through marine protected areas called Special Areas of Conservation, or SACs for short. And currently the UK does have two, one in the Moray Firth, Scotland, and one in Cardigan Bay, Wales. However, we currently have no specially designated protected areas for bottlenose dolphins in English waters, even though they are frequently sighted. So what do we know about bottlenoses in the southwest? Although they can be regularly spotted, very little is known about the population, and surveys in the early 1990s estimated the population to be approximately 51 individuals. But unfortunately, as you can see in this bar chart at the top here, since then sightings have significantly declined. And due to this limited knowledge and the apparent decline of the species in the region, the Southwest Bottlenose Dolphin Consortium was formed to try and find out more about these bottlenose dolphins and find out what's going on with them. And as I mentioned previously, in the UK, coastal populations are usually protected by these special areas of conservation. However, to get one designated, we need to know the distribution and the residency patterns of the dolphins before one is put in place. So this is what really the consortium has set out really to do, is just find out a lot more about the dolphins in the area and see how we can help to conserve them. So the consortium is a collaborative partnership, as Abby mentioned, between many stakeholders in the region who created a shared database for all their sighting reports. And members include wildlife tour operators, conservation charities, and members of the public. And really, any submissions and the sightings they put have been invaluable. Because photographic sighting reports are so important to us because they can help us identify and track individual bottlenose dolphins through their unique markings. Bottlenose dolphins can have scars and notches and pigmentations that can help us to identify them, like this photograph down the bottom of the screen. And tracking individuals by their markings not only gains us insight into where they go, it also shows us where their preferred habitat is and their social structure, which I will go into more detail on later in the talk, because that's what we're looking at right now. So in 2017, after looking through the database and analysing all the wonderful sightings submitted, researcher Rebecca Dudley and the consortium found a resident population of approximately 28 individuals occurring in the southwest year-round, with key habitat identified mainly in Cornwall. And although an amazing amount of data was collected through this study, it unfortunately highlighted that due to their low numbers, this coastal pod was at severe risk of local extinction, and sadly, we still currently have very limited knowledge on our resident pod. At the moment, we know that they live year-round around the Cornish, Devon and Dorset coastline, but we don't have much data on how long they live for, their preferred habitat and their reproductive rate. And most of the work completed on this pod has been in and around Cornwall, but sightings have also been submitted through Devon and Dorset. So it's very possible that these areas are used just as much by the pod, but have yet to be discovered. So the aim of the project this year was to increase the awareness of the population and get as much data as we possibly can from these regions, as we need the best scientific evidence to both support and encourage conservation action and hopefully to protect this pod. So these are the sort of questions we're looking into this year. We want to know specifically what is their range, are there seasonal movements, seasonal patterns in their movements even, how many there are, how long they actually live for, and can we reduce threats in their environment? Can we identify where we might be going wrong in the marine environment? So at the beginning of the year, regional gaps in previous data collection were identified, and groups in frequent contact with the coastal waters, such as diving, sailing, yacht clubs, and because we thought they were more likely to encounter the pod, were contacted, and also people with a vested interest, such as conservation charities. They were all invited to join the consortium and see if they have any sightings to report to us. And to publicise the project and recruit more citizen scientists, we started using a variety of methods, including a promotional video, if you've seen it, radio interviews, press releases, and our new social media. And if you haven't visited our Facebook, please do, because when EcoTour is going back out on the water soon, I'm hoping we'll have a lot more exciting photos and news to share with you in the upcoming weeks. So these photographic sighting records are invaluable to our work, and they are the basis of our whole project. Bottlenose dolphins have this lovely large sickle-shaped fin that can easily be spotted above the waves, and their fins are actually easily scratched and torn, which can leave these permanent markings and notches, particularly on this trailing edge, as you can see in this photo here. And these markings can be used to identify them, each individual, much like our own fingerprints. And this photo identification can not only be used to identify individuals, but it can be used to track their movements around the coast and their associations with other dolphins, which can help us to distinguish between our coastal resident population and other individuals. So tracking individual dolphin movements can also give us information on their range, their abundance, their preferred habitat, and even their survival, which is vital when campaigning for their protection. And historical photos, if you have them, are just as important as current photos, as citing information from previous years can help us track the survival of these individuals, which means we can start monitoring population trends, which is very important when we're trying to look at long-term plans for them. So what do we do once we have all these photographic sighting reports? Once photos are submitted, individuals are given 1 of 3 degrees of marking severity. So permanently marked individuals, grade 1, have nicks or large scars deemed to be identifiable for the duration of the study. Superficially marked individuals, or grade 2, have rape marks or scars considered likely to endure over a 1-year period. And temporarily marked individuals, grade 3, have light scars or rape marks that could fade between sightings. So once sightings are graded, they're then added to our catalogue, which was made in collaboration with Marine Discovery Penzance, who take a lot of lovely photos. And all sightings are matched with the catalogues when they come in. And if an individual doesn't match any of those in our catalogue, we then assign it a new identification code and add it to our catalogue. And once assigned an identification code, we then need the best photos of their left and right sides to make sure that we can see all of their distinctive markings, and also to make sure that we can ID the dolphin even if we only get a photo of one side. And this also makes it easier to match up sightings and to identify dolphins who are regulars in the area. And for example, these are members of our resident pod. This dolphin on the left is quite distinctive due to the top of their fin being damaged. So of course, this one is called topless. The one in the middle is a particular favourite of mine and can easily be identified by this big tag at the base of their dorsal fin. And this is Scratchy. And this last one is Overhang, which due to the particular shape of its dorsal fin is very easy to ID. So it's very good if you have bad and misty weather or just blurry photograph, you can often ID it just from the shape of it's quite distinctive. And it's also important that for this catalogue to display the dorsal fin of each individual identified each year. So we do that because it's important to monitor changes to their markings to make sure we're still IDing correctly all the dolphins. And as you can see, over time, dolphins can get nicks or lose some of their minor scratches. So photos are also updated yearly to reflect these changes. And this here shows the story of White Strike, who you can see picks up a lot of notches as the year go by. And even to 2020, he looks very different now. So due to the diverse nature of the data submitted, we needed to ensure that any inconsistencies in all these photos being collected are minimized. So photos are then graded. We give a grade between 1 and 4, with grade 1 photos being the best and grade 4 being the worst. And this little flowchart here shows how we go about assigning the grades. We first ask, is the fin more than 10% of the photo? If it's not, unfortunately, it's grade 4, as you can't see the fin clearly enough to be able to identify the dolphin. We then ask, is it in focus? Is it parallel to the camera? And how is the lighting? Because unfortunately, backlit photos are automatically assigned a grade 4, and this is because superficial markings on the dolphins won't be able to, you won't be able to see them. So although sometimes you can still identify a dolphin due to it's got quite distinctive marks on its trailing edge, like this photo here, I don't know whether you can see it or whether it's blocked, it's actually White Strike. Unfortunately, we still wouldn't be able to use that in most of our statistics able to correctly say that is 100% that dolphin, but we still use these photos for our locational data, so we can confirm that is actually in fact a bottlenose dolphin sighting. So grade 4 photos are still very valuable to us, and if it passes all these standards and criteria, it's assigned a grade 1. And this is a brilliant example of grade 1 photo. It's in focus, it comprises 10% of the photo, it's parallel to the photographer, and you can clearly see the trailing edge, which really helps us to identify a dolphin. Don't worry if you don't get a grade on photos, these are quite a rare feat. Any photos or sighting information to us is invaluable, and we really appreciate anything you can send in to us. But if you are lucky enough to see a pod of bottlenose dolphins and manage to photograph them, and although it might be quite difficult to do, it's also preferable for us to have photographs of all the members of the pod from that sighting, as dolphins seen in the same photographed encounters are considered to be associated, and therefore in the same community. So it really helps us to understand who's hanging out with who, and helps us to track different communities, especially our resident population. And this here, although it may look a bit scary, is an example of how we use those sighting reports to understand the different bottlenose communities in the area. So once we identify a dolphin through the photographed encounters, we can then also see who they associate with and begin to map who else is in that community. And the social structure map used all the photos submitted to us with dolphins identified through permanent markings, which means as the markings can't disappear, we can track the same dolphins throughout the study. And each identified dolphin is represented by one of these square nodes, the size of which also represents how many times we've been able to see them throughout the study, with the grey squares showing dolphins seen only once, and red squares, those that have seen on multiple occasions, with the black lines representing those individuals who were seen together, so were photographed within the same encounter. And as you can see, throughout all of the submissions, we found 12 different community groups, with the largest group, Network A, being our resident pod. So there's 28 members, they were seen on 93% of encounters, and they've seen on multiple occasions. So they're often spotted around the coast. But if you can see on the other clusters, B to L, they're only seen once, which is very common for offshore populations or lone individuals just popping into the study area. So analysing the social structure from these photographs is a very easy way and useful way of identifying different pods visiting the area, and it makes this easier for us to identify our resident pod. So once we've got worked out who's in our resident pod, we can then map where they've been and separate our sightings from other pods visiting the area. So this map here shows the distribution of all our photo verified encounters. Sightings of Network A, our resident pod, are in black, and all the other pods on this map are in red. And as you can see, we have a very heavy presence around Cornwall for our resident pod, but a much wider ranging ability than we previously had thought. It was originally thought that the pod ranged between Cornwall and Dorset, with hotspots mainly identified in Cornish waters. But if I show you their distribution since 2017, you can see that in recent years, the resident pod has been ranging much further than we had previously had thought, into Sussex and possibly even further, which also, whilst also not spending as much time around Cornwall. However, as you can see, our data is still very patchy along the coast, with big gaps in some places. So it's even thought that so even though we think that they use Cornwall the most, they might in fact be using the whole coast just as frequently, but we just don't have the data there yet. So discovering that this coastal population ranges much further than we had originally thought, although extremely interesting, has given us a few issues in our project this year, alongside the lockdown, which has meant a lot less photos have been submitted, but we still have some wonderful photos being submitted. And these issues are mainly because an important expected outcome for this research is to try and get this amazing pod protected, which usually takes the form of these SACs, which I mentioned previously, which usually encompass the population's core habitat. And if we have a look at this map, we can see that their core habitat range would actually be quite tricky to protect. The darkest blue shows that they spend most of their, the darkest blue on this map actually shows where they spend most of their time, much like a heat map. But you can see the dark blue stretches all along the coast. So even if we conserve and we put an MPA into place around the most heavily used areas in Cornwall, they still might be exposed to all these threats throughout their great range. And these dolphins are particularly vulnerable, not only because they have such few numbers, but they're extremely coastal, so they spend most of their time in waters less than 40 meters deep, which means they're passing through some extremely busy ports. So then we've started to think, if we, what are we going to do to try and protect them? Can we identify and to mitigate the possible threats throughout their environment as well? So that's what we're, sorry for all the maps. So that's what we're really looking to look into now. Here's a map of all the threats the pod can possibly run into, from shipping to pollution to climate change. And the darker the red, the more threats there are in that area. And what we want to do with this map is to map where the pod comes into contact with the most threats and see if we can identify the worst ones, and we can try to mitigate them in the future. But as you've seen before, my map is still rather patchy. So we don't really know the true range of the pod yet. So we need a lot more help from other citizen scientists. And would really appreciate if you could all come and help us out and promote this pod so we can get as much data on them as possible. Not only would we love to get some more photos and videos, but we also need word to be spread about our vulnerable pod. And as regulars around the coast and as dolphin enthusiasts, we think you might be of a greater chance of encountering this pod than most other people, and might already have some wonderful photos or videos, or know of someone who has photos or videos they might be willing to share. We hope that by creating this large network of citizen scientists all along the coast, we can help fill in those big gaps we have and learn so much more about this pod, and hopefully get them protected in the long run. Members of the public were instrumental on us finding out as much as we do right now about this pod. They're the ones submitting all the sightings and really promoting us. So the help is greatly needed again in the future to just sustain the sightings coming in. But if you are out on the coast, we do encourage you to keep an eye out for wildlife. But we also must remind everyone that we don't want to encourage any mass gatherings looking for dolphins around the coast. And we must also remind everyone that it is an illegal offence to deliberately disturb or harass a dolphin in its natural habitat. So when taking a photo of a dolphin, you should always try to keep your distance and allow any encounters to be on the dolphin's terms. And if you do see a disturbance or are just a bit worried about the welfare of the animals, you should report it into the hotline, whose number is on the screen right now, but you can also find it through the Cornwall Wildlife Trust website. And if you do have any sighting information or know of anyone who might like to contribute, please send them over to the Cornwall Wildlife Trust website, where it will link you over to the Environmental Record Centre, where you can submit your sightings throughout the whole of the South Coast for our dolphins. There is a limit on the photos that you can upload. I think it's about, yeah, it's 4. So if you do have a lot of photos or you have a video, you can always email it in. And the link for this website and the sighting page and my email address is all on our Facebook page. So what's up next for us? Once we've got enough data, we're planning to look more into their survival and abundance rate, and hope to update and fill in the gaps in the results we already have. So stay tuned, because hopefully this will all be completed in the summer once we have enough data all gathered together, and hopefully we'll have some more results for you soon. So yeah, for any more information, please visit the Cornwall Wildlife Trust website or our Facebook page. But if you have any questions now, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Shauna. That was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed that. Just as well for the IRCIS records and for ORCs, I'm pretty sure IRCIS have a bulk data form. I don't know if that is the same for your project, but I've done one of those forms previously for like when I've done like snorkel safaris and stuff and snorkel bio blitz, rather than send it. So I'll speak to them. Yeah, I don't know if it'd work. Like I said, I don't know if it'd work for your project, but it is there if you.
Cool.
Did you want to stop your screen share?
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, don't be, that's all good. And yeah, if anyone's got any questions, Shauna, please do. You can either send them on the messages at the bottom. If you want to send them directly to me and I can manage the questions, or when the screen has stopped sharing, I will go to gallery view. So I'll be able to see everybody then. So if anyone wants to turn your camera up, raise your hand, Whichever way you prefer to communicate, I locked it so you know. So, and you can unmute yourself now as well if anyone would like to ask a question. Was it? Or any comments to make or anything? Or are we all just completely mesmerised and floored by how awesome that talk was and Abby's introduction was, of course. Oh, thank you from Amy. That's the best kind of comment. I think we're good.
Wonderful.
Well, obviously, if anyone does think of any more questions, feel free to, hopefully you managed to get Shauna's email. We've got a thumbs up from Steph. You can send us a message at the Yorkshire Beach Rangers Project as well, and we can endeavour to answer them or have them answered by Shauna or Abby. So thank you so much. Round of applause, guys. That was amazing. Really, really enjoyed it. And thank you all. I hope you all got a lot from it. Amy said, sorry, we've got a question coming in. Thank you. I really liked it. Thank you for doing it. Now I know a lot about dolphins from Eva Rose, which is absolutely lovely, isn't it?
Thanks.
All right then, guys. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And like we said, you're going to hear more about Seaquest and how you can get involved and sort of record your sightings. So, oh, sorry, we have got a question coming now. Thank you. How rare is it to see bottlenose dolphins?
It depends where you are, really. You can spot them all around the coast all year. They're here all year. And they're quite coastal. So if you are out in Cornwall or on a coastal path, just keep an eye out. You might be able to spot them. I know if you're in Weymouth at the moment, they've got 3 dolphins there that have not left the area in a very long time. And they're just around Weymouth Harbour and Portland Bill. So most days you can spot them there as well. Yeah,
amazing. We had, I don't know, do we know what happened to him for quite a while? We had Splashy as well, didn't we? Splashy, also known as Pierre.
Yeah.
Depending on where you were.
He's number 271 in my catalogue. We haven't had many sightings of him in the last few years, but he was quite prevalent in 2017.
Yeah, I was out on Marine Discovery. I was seeing you had some pictures from their boat. I was out on their boat not long after I'd started my job, I think, and yeah, we had an encounter with him. He stayed with the boat for ages as well. He was just jumping around and showing off. It was amazing. Any other questions or anything before we sign off? No. Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much, guys. Thanks for joining us, and thank you so much, Shauna and Abby and Jodie. Thank you for helping me field. I was also doing some more fielding of Facebooky stuff as that was happening. It's been a bit manic, so hopefully it'll calm down now. But it just shows how popular this talk was. So thank you so much, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.